Now to a pair of business-related stories prompting a debate over the use of public tax dollars to help incentivize businesses. First up, GE. General Electric leaving its corporate home in Connecticut and will move to Boston, thanks in large part to $145 million in incentives, including tax breaks and more offered by Massachusetts to sweeten the deal. But some are already complaining that New York didn't do enough to make the state competitive in the GE sweepstakes here, let alone Connecticut, who let it go. 800 jobs will now shift from Connecticut to Massachusetts. And story number two, St. Louis Rams moving back to LA. The Rams owner claiming that St. Louis does not have the economy to support an NFL team, but most observers note the team will get a better deal on their stadium and other incentives in LA than they will in St. Louis, even though the city proposed a new $1 billion facility, including with a ton of taxpayer money. Meanwhile, St. Louis taxpayers still on the hook. More than $100 million owed from construction of the stadium. The Rams are leaving the Edwards-Jones Dome. Okay, Connecticut. Now, I know it's more than just a tax deal. There's a lot more to it. But I remember when Starwood left Westchester and came over to Connecticut. It was in part because Jody Rell did the hand-holding, went directly there in the rest.
Connecticut's, the handwriting's been on the wall for years. Company after company have been leaving. Wealth has fled. You know, what the legislators don't seem to understand, and they haven't for decades, is that they're in competition with 49 other states. They really are. And so a lot of people still live in Greenwich and Westport, but their legal address is in Wyoming or Florida. So huge wealth has disappeared. The jobs, you said 800 jobs. These are 800 really well-paying jobs. Now, GE didn't say, oh, we're going to leave Connecticut so we can go to Massachusetts. They made a decision when the legislature, for the umpteenth time, increased taxes retroactively, and then basically said, you got to pay. So GE said, we've had it, we're leaving. Now where do we go? Now, they may have gotten $140 million in Boston, but they probably got $150 million somewhere else and something.
Okay.
And so the bottom line is they went to Boston because that's where there's real energy.
But wait, do you think the debate, and it's obviously not GE, there's been other corporations, financial institutions who's left. If you have a conversation before the state legislature, would the argument be this is the right thing to do because we should incentivize these corporations, or is it whether you think it's the right or wrong thing to do because it's corporate welfare, it doesn't matter because somebody else is going to give it to them and we got to keep it here? Is it the practical or the right thing?
GE wouldn't have left if this legislature hadn't basically given them a finger and said, we can tax you any way we want, anytime we want, even if it's retroactive. So the bottom line is GE wasn't looking for Connecticut to give them something. They just didn't want Connecticut to shove it to them year in and year out. But the best way to attract business is to have sensible tax policy, sensible regulations, sensible ways that they interact with the business community.
But at some point, doesn't this risk becoming a race to the bottom as different states and municipalities offer different incentives and packages to try to keep businesses? And really the best example are the sports teams where, you know, you have owners who are just trying to make more money, but they're shopping and they're pitting one city against another, looking for the best deal, the best tax incentives, the best stadium.
They're on the hook, if you think about it, for $100 million right now because they genuflected and said, whatever you want to come here, you can do it. Now, I don't begrudge an owner from moving. Well, as much as people don't do it, sports is business too. But if you compromise yourself, you're going to get that kind of a deal.
They did a bad contract. But if you go to Washington, D.C. and you see where the baseball team is, there are so many buildings, so much activity, so much economic development that's taken place. So it just depends.
So a major corporation says, we're thinking of relocating in New Rochelle, Mr. Mayor. But these are the list of our demands. We're going to bring with us hundreds, if not thousands, of jobs. You're going to possibly be able to revitalize the area. You're going to bring in new blood here that's going to spend money in your facility and everything else. But I want the following tax abatements. I want the following little Lulus for an enticement here. And I want to go my pocket for any of them. How do you negotiate between, as he said, race to the bottom, and what he said, which is you're dealing with the real world here, where if you don't give it to them, 1,000 other cities would?
800 jobs are going to Boston eventually. They're going to get far more money than that they ever gave out. Far more.
Well, look, the point is there's not one answer. It's a case-by-case analysis, and you have to look at the cost and benefits comprehensively. And just as the congressman pointed out, if indeed you're going to reap economic rewards that exceed the incentives that you're providing, then it's probably in your local interest to offer those incentives. Now, Andrew still makes a good point. We'd probably all be better off if every city and every state entered into some non-aggression pact, but that's never going to happen. And so you have to deal with economic reality. But let me just make one more point, if I could. One of the things that attracted GE to Boston, if you believe their statements, is this complex of educational institutions, of technology, as you pointed out, the energy that's present in that area. And what that suggests to me is that looking at this through the lens of a simple tax equation is too simplistic. And in fact, the number of transactions in which the government is going to be directly involved by offering incentives is dwarfed by the number of business decisions that are going to be made on a purely private basis. And so we should be thinking in planning terms about the fabric of our land use regulations, about our transportation infrastructure, about the relationship between business and education. All of those things contribute to an environment in which high-quality businesses and high-paying jobs want to be located. And I think there's been too much of a focus on hitting this deal or that deal, and not enough of a focus on creating conditions that enhance the prospects for every deal.
I agree with that.
The hard answer, though, is you give GE the deal, right? Or you give them what they want. In this case, I've heard both sides of this debate being in Connecticut. Why doesn't an existing corporation say, what do I have to do? Threaten to leave here for you to give me the same deal?
I'm sure a lot of them
Where does
do.
it end?
Nice economy you got here. Be a shame if something happened to
No,
it.
that part that's a very good question. But the bottom line is, what kind of environment are you providing for the businesses that provide the jobs where people make money? And so, frankly, I don't think it's a race to the bottom. I think it's forcing legislators to start to be sensible.
There's a line, I don't know where it is, but there's a line between somebody basically, holding you at the end of an economic gun, and then there's the line of enticement. I don't begrudge any city for making a sweetheart deal if you can bring in a company. As much as people say you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, you got to do what's right for your state. However, I don't know where it ends. And that's the hard part for me. It'd be great if there was a non-aggression. How about a non-aggression pact, at least within the tri-state area?
I'll tell you where I don't know where it ends. Public employees that can retire at 45 and live another 40 years with defined benefit plans that nobody in the private sector has. This is going to force the public sector to start to say, maybe we've got to be even with what happens in the private sector.
Do you see what he just did, Dominic? In his head, he knew the clock was running that had wrapped the segment up. So he drops a bomb totally off the page here, and I can't do anything about it. He gets the last word. He's been doing this for.
Back?
Yes, of course. All right, coming up next, we're going to take a look at the 2016 presidential race, and we're going to bring in our good friend David Wallner atop the story. If history is a guide here, could the Republican nomination be a long, drawn-out contest that's actually not even decided till the convention itself? What would that do to Republicans' chances come November? Stay with us.